This weekend, Jordan Pataya almost scored one of the best finishes would have seen this year. Alas, he couldn't quite do it, but it got us thinking, what are the best almost moments in rugby? The best tries that weren't quite scored. Mark Cueto might have a word. The best kicks that didn't quite, maybe hit the post. What are the best almost moments in rugby? Please send them our way and I'll read plenty out next week. So let's stay in the Southern Hemisphere, as this week we got the first ever champions of Super Rugby unlocked. Now the Bulls went into the game knowing they only need to finish within 20 odd points, and so they then went a few points better than that and won 21-5 against the Pumas, not the Pumas we'll come back to, and therefore were able to crown themselves champions, the first champions of Super Rugby unlocked. We then will be leading into, a lot of these players will head off to play in the Currie Cup in the coming weeks as South Africa continues to kind of intermingle and to play games amongst each other. It's going to be interesting to see how those players move over, how they continue, because unfortunately the Springboks aren't playing at the minute. They would have this weekend been playing the All Blacks. That would have been a hell of a game that I think all of us wanted to see, but alas, instead, we just got to watch the two teams who've just beaten the All Blacks in the last game out play each other, which is a picture I don't think I've ever seen before in rugby. That doesn't really ever happen. So, the Wallabies played the other Pumas, Argentina, and it finished as a draw. It kind of had to, It's two teams that approached the game very differently. Australia were looking to play far more attacking rugby, whereas Argentina were just taking whatever chance they got. They were just they were kicking goals from everywhere. They were really scrapping it out. It was one of those, it's the kind of game they'll describe as being for the purists, but I am a purist, so I loved it. There were fantastic performances throughout both teams, and it's going to be interesting to see how they go. They rematch in 2 weeks' time, and that could be a title decider, because Argentina next week play the All Blacks again. Now, that's going to be a hell of a... If people thought the All Blacks were going to be fired up after losing to the Wallabies last week, just imagine how angry they're going to be. Just imagine how focused they're going to be on beating Argentina after losing for the first time ever a week ago. I'm so excited to see how that goes. And the competition, the Tri-Nations, is currently all tied up. All three teams are on 6 points with 2 games to go. Argentina, the only team with multiple games left. There's 2 games left. It's so interesting, and we could genuinely be seeing Argentina could win the title this year. Meanwhile, elsewhere in international rugby, we've got a good idea of where the Autumn Nations Cup is going to go. We've got a good idea of how that's going to fall. England looked to have taken control of the first pool after they beat Ireland pretty comprehensively. Johnny May scoring 2 tries, one of which is just incredible. It's a try that should never be scored. You can't quite understand how it was scored. Firstly, he beats Chris Farrell with some footwork, and then he's just quicker than everyone else on the earth. And despite kicking it into a sort of position where he should have far more work to do, not the Ireland players covering across, is so rapid that he just gets there well before anyone else. It's an incredible try, and it kind of saw England home. Ireland did strike back later on. Jacob Stockdale scored, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough, and in the end, England came through quite comprehensively. Maro Itoje was fantastic. And it's been an interesting week for Maro Itoje, because after his man of the match performance, he then got a message of congratulations from DJ Khaled after he signed for Jay-Z's management company.
I got 99 problems, but ain't one.
Meanwhile, Wales beat Georgia in a game of rugby. Louis Rees-Zammit scored his first try for Wales, which was quite exciting. Welsh Rugby Twitter was going to be absolutely all over that. And then France were able to hold it home against Scotland. It was, again, a very even game that probably would have been fair if it finished as a draw, but it was decided by a great try just after half-time as Remy Vakatawa and Vincent Rattez combined to create a spectacular set-piece try that was then, finished by Vakatawa, and in the end decided the game. It was played, wet weather and so on, but it was a great game to watch. Stuff constantly happening. There was a drop goal. Probably, for me, the best game of the Autumn Nations Cup so far. However, it was not the game of the weekend, because that absolutely had to go to the game between the England women and the French women at Twickenham. Just a few days after they were drawn in the same World Cup pool. The two kind of biggest rivals. It's maybe one of the biggest fixtures in women's rugby. They were drawn together for the World Cup, and they were then playing each other at Twickenham a few days later. Here is my look at that game, which England won right at the death. It's all in the subplots. 10 months since they played out one of the best games of the year, 1 week since they last faced each other, and 2 days since they were drawn in the same World Cup pool. Possibly women's rugby's greatest rivals, England and France, played again, and it did not let the fixture down. France started at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and yet Zoe Harrison drew first blood, scoring against the run of play with this try here, only for France to strike back with a deserved score by Emmeline Gros, with the final pass coming from one Ms. Cyril Banet, a lady who's had quite a 2020, and she intended to see it out in style. Before half time, she'd scored a spectacular solo try from her own half. And then, once the next half had begun, she followed it up by narrowly escaping a yellow card through this incident, only to come back on and score a second score. A great finish. And France took a heavy lead, but it was far from the end, even though it might have felt like it. England emptied the bench all at once, and the impact was instantly felt. 2 tries in quick succession, and the deficit reduced to just 1 point. France were left desperately defending and doing a pretty amazing job surviving phase after phase after phase until it happened. One player late to roll away and it's game over. Penalty awarded, and up steps Scarrett. The deficit is now 2 points. England are ahead, the game is over. However, with the French having now suffered 2 agonising losses and 1 slightly heavier one to their biggest rivals in the space of 1 year, the 2 teams will now play again twice next year, and both times for trophies, once in the Six Nations and once at least in the World Cup, as this fixture remains all about the subplots. The Premiership also returned this week. Exeter got off to a winning start, they're defending champions, as did Leicester, who obviously, but for Saracens' misdemeanours, would have finished bottom last week. They got a bonus point win to kick things off, so things looking far better for them despite being relegation favourites. So it's going to be an interesting season in the Premiership, lots happening and lots of games to get through. In the Pro 14, there were comprehensive wins for Leinster against Cardiff and Connacht against Zebra. Meanwhile, there were 2 very tight games, as Ulster just about held it home against the Scarlets, who really pushed them, just 2-point difference. And then Benetton looked to have beaten the Ospreys with 5 minutes to go, only for 2 quick tries, with Stephen Myler kicking the conversion at the end to win it for them and just about steal it by 2 points right at the death. And then, so the other thing, right, we asked you, there's a few Benetton players who may be considering that after the full-time whistle went, what rugby match made you cry? Now, I am personally the kind of person that cries more when something is good than bad. Reb goes in the opposite direction and says South Africa 0, New Zealand 57 made him cry. Luckily, the next match that made him cry was the 2019 final. I think for very different reasons. Hugo Owens, oh man, when New Zealand came back from 22-7 down to beat Ireland in 2013, I'll never forget that game. Ryan Crockley scoring in the last play. Oh man, Amano is saying when Italy beat the Springboks in 2016, I cried like a toddler. That's lovely. Tatenda, the 2007 Super Rugby final, the Brian Habana try, made him cry as a Shark supporter. Sorry. Al Sharon's winning try for Canada in 1993 against Wales. Very good, I can imagine. There's, again, a few Canadian tears for different reasons ever since. England fans in the opposite direction, 2015 against Wales. Sorry. Japan, South Africa 2015. How have I had to scroll that far to get someone saying Japan against South Africa? Wow. Japan against Scotland as well. So many Japan shouts now coming in as we scroll down a bit. Japan against Ireland. I was in a bar in Tokyo watching that, and there was a Japan fan next to me who started crying at full time. It was lovely. It was a really special moment. That sounds like I'm just enjoying people crying. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. It's great to see the sheer emotion of it. The Ireland's women beating New Zealand in 2014. Of course, first time any Ireland team beat New Zealand. Thank you, Saoirse. Here's a good one from Rugby Gareth. Ireland's Grand Slam win in 2009. The first time they'd done it, only their second ever Grand Slam, the first time they'd done it in more than 50 years. I can only imagine how that will have. I completely appreciate that. And that brings us to an end for this week, I'm afraid. I hope you have a lovely time, I hope you have a lovely week, and I will see you next week after loads of rugby. There's so much more coming up. I'll see you next week for more of The Feed.